Steve, got dinner fall Chirashkity, Chlorella, Unsure, Air, and Cluiche, Lumps to Séamus Brady. Welcome back to another episode here on Cluiche, guys. My name is Séamus Brady, still for Shock to Nagrelga. I have to keep the Irish introduction. I'm joined by Aaron Prendergast, the mind behind Gaelic Games Fan TV. Aaron, we've another bumper weekend of action coming up in the leagues, and because of St. Patrick's Day, the majority of that is on Saturday. I was saying it to Matthew, I'm starting to think about doing my weekend recap on the Saturday night because I'm obviously doing stuff on Patrick's Day, but a busy weekend ahead of us.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I'm very much looking forward to it. There was a lot of cracking games to look forward to. I think promotion and relegation is obviously, there's going to be, a lot of teams promoted this weekend, teams potentially relegated as well. A lot of very interesting permutations, most certainly. Like looking at Division 1, I think Monaghan Tyrone is a huge game there that stands out, just in the sense that, Monaghan could be relegated this weekend, or they could beat Tyrone and potentially actually be out of the relegation zone, which might sound a bit mental considering how poor they've been in the last couple of weeks. But, both of those two sides are massive rivals. Galway against Dublin as well, Roscommon, Kerry, Mayo, Derry, and even like looking further down the divisions like Armagh, Cavan, whoever comes through that is going to be promoted. And even looking at Division 3, like you've got Down Westmeath, two sides in flying form there. And yeah, really looking forward to it. And yeah, looking forward to previewing the games.
Yeah, no, let's dive right in with that game. Starting off with Division 1's round 5. Tyrone against Monaghan is a 4-pointer. I know it's a cliche, but I think whoever loses this is really, especially Monaghan, teetering so close to the drop. Monaghan, you mentioned, like they still are capable of staying up. And when you consider that, like their last few games since they beat Dublin, they've been annihilated by Derry, annihilated by Kerry, beaten handy by Roscommon as well, and beaten handy enough by Galway. If they pull off the survival this time, starting with the win obviously against Tyrone and Healy Park, is that their greatest escape yet?
I think it probably will be, yeah. Like I suppose they had a fairly good one, didn't they, a couple of years ago? Obviously, when they beat Dublin in that final game, that was a fairly mad escape because, like, literally going into the final kick of the game, they were already relegated. They just, Jack McCarron scores that late free to obviously keep them up. But even last year, beating Mayo, who had probably been the most informed team in the league at that point. But it's definitely not inconceivable, and I do have a funny feeling Monaghan might get something from this game, in all honesty, because I think they didn't become a bad team overnight. I know they lost the last 4 games and they were beaten fairly convincingly in a lot of those matches, but they didn't become a bad team overnight. They certainly didn't. Like, it was only a couple of 4 or 5 weeks, 6 weeks ago when they beat Dublin, all Ireland semi-finalists last year. McCarthy and McManus, I think, will both start, because I think these are the type of games you need to bring them in for. And I think Monaghan's season starts now this weekend. You have Tyrone, then you have Mayo, and then you have, I think, is it Cavan, I think, I think it's Cavan, obviously, in the Ulster preliminary. Yeah, so I think, I fancy Monaghan to turn up. I think Tyrone have been very inconsistent at the best of times this year. You don't know what version of Tyrone you're going to get. I think aside from Derek Hanavan, they've looked fairly ordinary at the best of times. So yeah, I actually fancy Monaghan. I know that sounds a bit bizarre considering their last 4 games they've been beaten comfortably. And look, if you were to check Score BO or even watching the game and you've seen it unfold and Tyrone are 6-7 points up, you probably wouldn't be that surprised either. But I just fancy Monaghan, because I think these are the type of games they get up for, and I think this game will mean more to them than Tyrone. And yeah, I fancy them to pull off the shock.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those things where, how many lives do you have left? Like, how many more times can you go to the well? How many more times can you try, with that last Hail Mary, stay up? They did it in 2022 against Dublin. They did it last year as well. Can they do it again this year? And myself and Matthew were saying on his podcast, obviously big shout out to the Gaelic Statsman, we were saying, if they are to not stay up, the one year that all 3 of us have predicted them to stay up, but then they did stay up the year that all 3 of us predicted them to go down. It's like they just refuse to do what people expect them to do. I honestly think Tyrone probably will beat them in this game. I just don't see enough this time. They were losing games narrowly in Division 1 last year that then you kind of knew that they could pick it up. But You never know, man. You really never know. It's just on paper, their team has been hit so hard compared to last year. Like, no Carl Gallagher, no Rory Began, no Darren Hughes, no Kieran Hughes. If McManus comes back in, will he be 100% vintage McManus? Probably not. He has been out in the cold. He has not been getting much minutes into him, so he's probably not going to be at his absolute brilliant best. Tyrone, you're right, have been really inconsistent. But in the Mayo game, I saw something which tells me that when their back is against the wall, they might just find an answer. I probably will go with Tyrone to take this one. Same as yourself. I think Tyrone will either win this game by 4 or 5 points, or Monaghan will beat them. And Monaghan will then kick on to actually stay up, because they have Mayo in their last game to save themselves then. And that was also the same fixture they had last year to save themselves. And sure enough, they won it. So, I mean, crazy, crazy stuff. We'll move on then to our own County Dublin. We're going away to Pearse Stadium this weekend to take on Galway. Galway still not out of the woods yet by any means. Dublin now are looking completely the other direction towards a potential league final appearance. Dublin are moving well now. And the difference was, when you looked at our performances in 2022 versus now, this year, while we did lose to Monaghan, yes, and we did lose to Mayo, the performances weren't bad. And you knew that we could turn it around. We have turned it around since. What are you expecting from this one?
Yeah, I think Dublin should win fairly comfortably, I think, especially with recent form, obviously beating Derry and Kerry fairly handily. I don't think it will be as comfortable in terms of the scoreline, but I think it will still be very comfortable in terms of performance. Like, when you look at a lot of Galway's games, they're fairly low scoring. They don't really concede too much. They don't score too much either. Although in the last few games they have started to find their feet. Especially young Rory Cunningham looks like a decent player. In fairness, he, I think, scored a goal and 3 points the last day. But yeah, I'd fancy Dublin. I think this might be a game where Dublin have the majority of the possession. They're slowing the game down. It's probably not overly entertaining. Dublin probably have a 3-4 point lead, at half time. They probably just manage the game throughout the end. I don't think you'll see Dublin play at the same levels that they played against Derry and Kerry, but at the same time, I think they'll be very, very comfortable. And yeah, like, it's going to be interesting. It's mad because Dublin have looked so good in the last two games that people are forgetting that James McCarthy, Paul Mannion, Jack McCaffrey, Mick Fitzsimons, Con Basquel, all still, but have to come back into the side. And I just wonder, could you maybe see a few of them this weekend? Because I think they have to be introduced at some point. Maybe you do wait till Leinster. I'm not sure. And maybe there's a case they don't even get into the team, considering how well Dublin are playing. But yeah,
it's the same thing with Galway. Galway have Walsh, Comer.
They do, yeah. Yeah, and that could be a little trump card, maybe as well. Like, I'm not too sure with injury status of Comer or whatever else, but yeah, I'd fancy Dublin maybe to just about come through it.
Yeah, no, like, I completely agree with your prediction. I think Dublin are going to put up a good first half performance, go in at halftime, something like 3-4 points ahead, have a good third quarter, and very much manage out the final quarter. I'm predicting something like a 4 or 5 point win for Dublin. We have turned a corner since the defeat to Mayo. The Roscommon game, it seemed like we were clicking, and then the Kerry game, by God, we were clicking in that game. And then to beat Derry as well away from home last weekend, probably the most difficult fixture you could have drawn up for Dublin, and came past it with flying colours. So I'm as confident in this Dublin team as I have been in a long, long time. So I'm backing us to get this victory here. This game is massive as well in terms of potential consequences for a defeat for Roscommon this time. They're against Kerry at Dr. Hyde Park. Roscommon got a great win against Monaghan, which looked like it might have kick-started, a potential fight back. But then that was immediately followed up with defeat to Mayo. Kerry now travelled to the Hyde. Kerry got back to winning ways after the hiding they got against Dublin by beating Tyrone, and they showed a bit of fight in that game, literally in the case of David Clifford. But what are you expecting from this one?
Yeah, I think Kerry will be far too strong here. I think Cliffords are obviously back in the side. Sean O'Shea's in there. Killian Burke's been a good addition to the team. I just think Roscommon have looked very, very, very flat this year, unfortunately. As you said, they had that great win versus Monaghan. But I think the problem for Roscommon is when they go 3-4 point, 2-3 4 points down. You never feel like they can get back into the game, whatever way they play. Like they seem to be playing a very slow game, and they don't really seem to make much happen. I think they're reliant on the same old players like Enda Smith and Kieran Murtagh or German Murtagh as well. So yeah, I couldn't see Roscommon doing that in this game. So yeah, I'd fancy Kerry fairly comfortably, probably by 5 or 6. In all honesty.
Yeah, no, I probably would go similar along those lines. Not to be too harsh on Roscommon, but I just feel like Roscommon have been hit very hard in the off season with players like Kieran Murtagh stepping away. You know, they haven't really managed to get, hit the ground running in Division 1, so to speak. And it's a bit of second season syndrome. Like last year they were up, they took teams by surprise, especially the win over Tyrone on the opening day. That really took a lot of people by surprise, and beating Galway in round 2. But the reality is that like it seems like the jig is up. It seems like they're going to go down. Especially when you look at how they were put away by Mayo, they were put away by Dublin. Like it's the type of defeats where you didn't think that they were going to win that game at any point. So that's why this one against Kerry, I don't see them beating Kerry, to be honest, which is what they need to do. I can see them putting up a good first half, but I can see Kerry putting on a bit of the burners in the third quarter, Clifford getting a goal or something, and that just being that, and Kerry go on to get the win. Interestingly enough, and I was talking about this with Matthew on his podcast, we were talking about Davy Burke and his interviews after the game, and we were saying, personally, both of us agreed that we don't necessarily agree with that style of coming out and, basically bringing more attention on yourself. Look, we get it. Myself and yourself are both working in the media. It can be fun to have characters like that who give, eccentric answers to the press and give the press something to talk about. But at the same time, if I was one of the players in the camp, and it's the same thing for Davy Fitzgerald, which we'll move on to, part of me would be like, man, can you stop talking like this and getting everybody looking at us, because it makes it more embarrassing when we lose then. When you go out and say, we've had 65 training sessions already, and yet we're winless after 3 games, that's embarrassing. Like, so would you be of that same sentiment, or do you think it's a good tactic to put a bit of a fire under the players?
Yeah, but I don't know, to be honest with you. It's one of them. It can work one or two ways. Like fair enough. I think it was after that game that they played Monaghan, I think, and then they beat Monaghan. So maybe you could say there was a little bit of a response, but then obviously against Mayo they were very, very flat. So it's kind of hard to know. Like I think he's probably. I feel like when a manager does start doing that, it's maybe. Like, especially when it's happened more than once, and he's had a few kind of outbursts. Like he had a bit of an outburst, obviously, after they beat Mayo in the championship last year. Fair enough, that was after a win. And look, he's a young enough manager. He's obviously managed in Wicklow and won an All Ireland with the under-20 Kildare's, or Kildare under-20s. But like he hasn't really sort of managed too much senior level. So maybe there's a little sense of inexperience there. But
it screams to me of like trying to be like, well, it's not me. I'm not the one. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's almost like I don't know. Like I know this is maybe a different example, but it does kind of remind me a bit of like Jose Mourinho a little bit when it would be coming towards the end of his time as a manager, and it was like he realized, he realizes he can't get anything more out of these players. So maybe the only way I can get something out of these players is if I just go mad at them in interviews, and that might light a fire under the belly of some of the players, because they might want to prove the manager wrong. And look, sometimes it can work, sometimes it doesn't. And yeah, it's probably one of them. If you're a player of Roscommon, it's not really what you want to see, especially as well when Davy Burke, he's not a Roscommon man. Like he is a Kildare man, and he's like, fair enough. I've listened to him on podcasts and everything else. He knows a lot about the game, and I'm sure he's watching Roscommon football inside and out in terms of club championships and everything else. But like, was he really that invested in Roscommon football 3, 4, 5 years ago? Probably not, So it is one of them where it's like, just calm down maybe a little bit, because at the end of the day, like other than that win versus Mayo, they haven't, what else have they really done?
Yeah. Look, it's the type of thing where if I was in that camp and I was a player, same thing with Davy Fitz, I'd be like, look, man, can you just pipe down a little bit and stop making everybody look at us? Because it makes it more embarrassing than if we go down and you say that we did all these training sessions, because that gives the people that are attacking you, that gives them a bigger stick to do it with, because they can use your quotes against them. They can use those, you had 65 training sessions before the year even began.
Yeah.
And you still didn't do this. So it mounts the pressure onto you. You don't see John Kiley do it. You don't see Desi Farrell do it. You don't see Jim. You never saw Jim Gavin do it. You never saw Brian Cody do that. And there's a reason why they don't do that, because it brings more attention and more pressure onto your team and more pressure onto your players to deliver. You did see, and I'm not just saying Dublin managers are the greatest ever, you saw the Dublin teams do it in the 2000s. Under Pillar Caffrey, under Tommy Lyons, unlike that, sticking their chests out a little bit in interviews and, yeah, we're going to do this and we've been doing this and we've been doing that. And what happened when it went? It went flat on its face real quick. So once you talk like that in the media, you up the stakes of a victory or a defeat. So personally, if I was one of the players, I'd be saying, like, look, man, can you please stop? But anyway, one team that have definitely been flying, look, fresh off the back of their only defeat of the year so far, is Derry. They go away now to face Mayo in McHale Park. I actually think this has the makings of being a really difficult game to call. And I've said it to Matthew that I'm picking this one to be a draw.
Yeah.
I just think that there's a late Ryan O'Donoghue equaliser written all over this.
Yeah, like I'd edge towards that maybe as well. Only reason I think Derry might slightly come through it is I was thinking about when Louth played Mayo last year, and that was under Mickey Hart. And obviously Louth got a lot of men behind the ball, made life difficult, kept hitting Mayo on the counter-attack. Obviously Mayo, narrowly won the game, but obviously it was different levels in terms of players. And I just think Mayo are that type of team that always struggle against blanket defenses. They always struggle against teams who get a lot of men behind the ball. And I know Derry haven't always been like that this year. To be fair, to give them credit, especially in the opening part of the league, they have gone after teams. They, it's not like it's been like Jim McGuinness style football of 2012 or whatever. Like they have played football, but I could just see Mickey Hart setting Derry up, very defensive, frustrate the living daylights out of Mayo. At the end of the day, Derry have nothing to lose. If this game's a draw, it suits them down to the ground, because then they're in the league final. If they lose the game, well, then they have Roscommon next week, and they'll feel like, we can win that, and then we're in the league final. So I think Derry have almost got nothing to lose here in many ways, and yeah, I could see them, a lot of men behind the ball, hit Mayo on the counter attack, frustrate the living daylights out of them, and yeah, I just fancy Derry to nick it.
Yeah, like I do understand that, and if you were to push me and say, okay, pick one that you think is going to win, I would say Derry. But I also have seen Mayo over the years, always, for good or for bad, play to the level of the team that they are playing against. And I think that they always up their game for the Kerrys, the Dublins, and now the Derrys. Whereas they drop their level for teams that are in the lower parts of Division 2 and Division 3 come Championship. They don't do it against Division 4 teams. They did give out some fairly bad beatings to Leitrim and Sligo over the years, but they made hard work at teams in the qualifiers that were in Division 3 at the time, like Derry, like Cork. Like, they made hard work out of those games. That was 2017 when Cork and Derry took them to extra time back to back. And then they ended up taking Dublin to an inch of their life after beating Kerry in the All-Ireland semi-final. So they definitely have a track record of playing to the team that they're playing against. I'm happy to go with a draw. I think Derry will be in control for most of the game, and then Mayo will do their signature late burst, and they'll hit like 3-4 points in a row, and I think O'Donoghue will get a late equaliser, and I think that will be that. But I think Derry will be on course to make it into a league final, and I think Dublin will be the team that play them in that league final, which would be fireworks. Moving on to what has always been my favourite division in the Allianz League, because there's always so much on the line. Division 2's round 5, and this is the game with the most kind of riding on it. Louth against Fermanagh in RD. So we're talking about what one is the most important. Whoever loses this game, Aaron, is down.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, like, I mean, both sides are obviously down there. The bottom of Division 2, Kildare, you'd feel are already gone. Barring a miraculous set of circumstances, they're going to be relegated regardless of what happens sort of going into the final couple of games. Yeah, I think Louth have been a little bit unlucky this year. I actually think both sides have been a little bit unlucky. Like, it's not like both of these two have been hammered in a lot of their defeats. They've been narrow defeats. Like Cork have, or Fermanagh lost out late in that game versus Cork. They had won that, they would have been above Cork right now, and they probably would have been safe. You're looking at Louth, very unlucky not to get at against Meath, missed multiple goal chances. Could have beat Armagh on the opening day as well. So both Louth and Fermanagh, I think, we'll probably look at it and think we're maybe a little bit unfortunate to actually be in this scenario. But I think Louth at home in RD would probably just tip it for me. I think because I've watched Louth a few times this year, and especially in the Meath game, I thought they were very unlucky not to win that. I think they do have enough to get over the line. Like we know, obviously Sam Mulroy, how good he is, but you've got Kieran Keenan in there who's looking very good. Maybe some other players come back in from injuries and everything else. So yeah, I'd fancy Louth.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think if you were to look at it, Louth were so unlucky to not get anything out of the Meath game, the Cavan game as well, and the Armagh game. There's 3 games off the bat that they were very unlucky to not get anything out of. You can apply the same to Fermanagh. They were unlucky to not win the Meath game outright. They were very unlucky against Cork. That goal against Cork, that felt catastrophic at the time when that goal went in. That was like, if that goal hadn't have gone in, as you said, they'd be pretty much safe. But here we are, like in this position now where it's do or die. And I think Louth, especially in RD, are so hard to beat. So I will tip Louth, apologies, to win that. That's the tiredness kicking in. It is 10 o'clock. So Armagh against Cavan is the next game in the Athletic Grounds. This one is hugely significant as well. Cavan, if they win this game, go level on points with Armagh. And I mean, that shows how Cavan have just snuck along under the radar while Armagh and Cavan have been getting all the plaudits. If Cavan beat them, they turn the whole ship around.
Absolutely, yeah. And it is kind of mad to think, because like Armagh are unbeaten, 9 points on the board. Like in most other divisions that, you'd already be promoted, you'd already be thinking towards the Ulster Championship and everything else. But because Cavan have, sort of been like a pesky fly, that just won't go away, despite it all. And not many people expected them to be in this situation. But yeah, like I think it'll be a very close game. I could see Armagh just about getting over the line. I think they have played very good football so far this year. Rian O'Neill probably back. Maybe he will start in this one. Cavan will definitely cause them problems, though. I've no doubt about that. But I just think Armagh look like the shackles have been let off a little bit more this year. They look to be playing more football of not last year, but more sort of 2022 when they were playing very, very good stuff back then. Whether that's because of the level of opposition they're playing, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think Armagh, I think like their defensive record has been very, very strong as well. So yeah, I'd fancy Armagh just about, though. I think maybe like 2 points. I think going into the final 7-8 minutes, like this is probably in the melting pot. Maybe, Armagh's bench, players coming off the bench, maybe, Andrew Murnan comes on, or Stephen Campbell or something like that. That might maybe just swing it.
Yeah, I think Armagh will shade this ever so slightly. I think Armagh will shade this because it's a type of game where Cavan will not fear Armagh in the slightest. Like the Ulster rivalries there, no county in Ulster fears another county. They all raise the game for each other. Like how many times have we seen All-Ireland champions go into Ulster and then immediately lose the Ulster championship? It like whenever an Ulster team is successful, the next team raises their game. If you look at it on paper, Armagh have been better and they've rooted out the likes of Oisin Cronady. Keane McConville has finally got the run in the team. Like they've really, really produced some cracking footballers over this league campaign, and they're having their champagne season in Division 2 where they are too good to be in that division. So they will get promoted most likely, but this is the one stumbling block that they could fall on. And I don't think they will. I think they will shade it, but exactly as you said, and I actually think it's a good thing for Cavan not to go up this year. I know that sounds very patronising, but I just think it's too soon. Galligan came in. It's the new manager. He has only had a very, very short space of time to go up. And I like to deal with this team. And I think if you're to go up to Division 1 in only your second year with the team, it would be an incredibly hard task to stay up. Like, we're seeing it now with Davy Burke. It's his second year at Roscommon, and they look like they're destined to go down. Like, we've seen teams go up too soon in their development. We've seen, like, Meath go up too soon. They lost all their games and were relegated back down. I'm not saying that that's going to happen to Cavan, but when you look at players that have stepped away, like Raymond Galligan himself, like Gerard McKiernan, like Conor Moyna, that all these lads have stepped away from the team. Martin Riley as well, another stalwart that's departed in recent times. They are transitioning into the team built around the Paddy Lynches, built around the Jared Smiths, built around the Kieran Bradys. And they need time to develop. And I think Division 2 is actually the best place to develop. Division 2 is why we're seeing the best out of Colin Basquel. It's why we're seeing the best out of Lorcan O'Dell for Dublin. And then for Derry, it's, they've been able to really build their team with strength. And the fact is, Derry missed out on Division 2, on promotion from Division 2 in their first year there. Roscommon and Galway went up, but you knew damn well the second year that Derry were destined from the get-go to go up to Division 1. And I actually think that could be what happens with Cavan. I think Cavan will just miss out on promotion this year, but you will know fine well that next year they are going to be locked, loaded and ready to push for Division 1 football. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think they could definitely be in the mix all right next year. Like, I think I do agree as well, though. I think, like, if they were to get promoted, it's probably a weird scenario. And I think I remember speaking with John McMahon, and I think he even said as well that it's just that, he's just enjoying it. It's not really, if we get promoted, fair enough, we'll accept it, but it's not really the be all and the end all, that way. And yeah, like, because especially like if it is Donegal who go up with them, like, you'd be looking at it and thinking you could see Cavan losing every game, and it's not to discredit Cavan, but it's just because of how strong Division 1 is, like, it'd be very, very tough for them to get anything. But yeah, look, I think Armagh ultimately will beat them, but I think Cavan, like, going into next year with some of the newer faces have come in this year and obviously last year as well. Yeah, they could make a real stab at it, especially like when you look at it, Monaghan and Roscommon coming down, both maybe on a bit of a downward trajectory possibly. So, it's not like Donegal and Armagh coming down. Jim McGuinness obviously coming into Donegal. So everyone kind of expected Donegal and Armagh to go up. So I don't think it'll be like that if Monaghan and Roscommon come down.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I honestly think that Cavan are a very good shout to go up next year. I also think, like, Galligan has just been fantastic so far. Like, when you think about it, that he comes in his first year as manager, not one complaint out of him. The players I mentioned that he's lost, like himself in goal, Gerard McKiernan, like an absolute vital cog for Cavan over the last few years. The fact that Thomas Galligan didn't come back, the fact that Conor Moyne is not there, like, these are crucial operators for Cavan through their successful years when they won the Ulster Championship and everything like that. So he's got on with the job and he deserves absolutely huge credit for it. One team that probably will go down confirmed this weekend is Kildare. Kildare host Donegal at Netwatch Cullen Park. Obviously, it's not Kildare's traditional home venue, but they are playing their league games there this year. Donegal, have been swashbuckling, have been brilliant so far under McGuinness since he's come back. And people expected this from McGuinness, so he almost isn't getting the credit he deserves. But my God, he's really turned the ship around quickly with Donegal. They are on a one-way ticket out of Division 2. And I think they're going to beat Kildare along the way.
Absolutely, yeah. I think this will be a fairly comfortable victory. I think Kildare, unfortunately, just for whatever reason, it's just not working at all this year. And I know obviously a lot of people are coming out in support of Glen Ryan, and I've seen today the Kildare County Board have come out and backed Glen Ryan again. So look, he has the full support of the back or the board in Kildare. So you kind of hope that the players can start putting in better performances because of that. I suppose, look, there definitely is confidence issues. Like, they seem to, because they do have good players and they have good moments. And even against Cork, you've seen a few of their good moments with Daniel Flynn scoring a goal, setting up another goal. They still have likes of Jimmy Hoyland and Derek Kirwan are injured. That way. So like
Kevin Feely got in the team of the week.
And he's been outstanding so far this year as well. So it is a strange one with Kildare. They're sitting there with 5 defeats. That they probably aren't a side who should be finishing bottom of Division 3. And but look, I think maybe going down might be what they need. You know, like go into the Tailteann Cup, bring through younger players. It might be a chance at a shot of silverware. They could probably look at what Meath done last year. I think unfortunately Kildare just need to get through these last 2 games. At this point, it doesn't really matter now at this stage. Get through these last 2 games, see what you can do in Leinster, and then if you're in the Tailteann Cup, obviously if you don't get to a Leinster final, that actually might be better for Kildare than actually getting to a Leinster final. So yeah, look, I'd fancy Donegal probably by 6-7.
Yeah, no, I do agree with you. I think Donegal will probably take. I think Kildare will probably put up a fight. I think Kildare will probably show a bit of fight, show a bit of grit, show a bit of determination. But I probably will lean towards Donegal to take it in all seriousness. Moving on to the final game, then this one is crucial for Cork. They're obviously on the path to what probably is safety, but this game might be a major roadblock in that. With 2 games to go, they face Meath at Port Talton. And if you think Meath will let their foot off the gas just because they're safe, they definitely won't. The rivalry between Cork is absolutely fierce. Just go back to the 1980s, 1990s. If you're a footballer from Meath or Cork, you know about the rivalry with the significant other county. So this game, Colin O'Rourke definitely will not let his boys take the foot off the pedal, which makes this a very dangerous away trip for Cork.
Yeah, absolutely not. Like if anyone knew about the rivalry between Meath and Cork, it would definitely be Colin O'Rourke. Make no question about that. And yeah, like I suppose for the younger generation of football fans, they probably forget, the Meath and Cork rivalry. They probably don't realise, how big of a rivalry this was, throughout the 90s and early 2000s and everything else. But yeah, like I think, Meath, fully enough, still have a slight outside chance of promotion. If Donegal were to slip up against Kildare, because I think they played Donegal in the final game as well. So there is still a minute chance for Meath. And to be fair to Meath, they've been very resilient, very hard to beat. And yeah, I'd fancy them to just about edge over against Cork, maybe by a point.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to say. I'm being honest now saying this. I was very, very torn on this on Matthew's show. I didn't know who I'd back. I might be bored and say a draw, but it's actually hard to know. The more I think about it,
It could be a draw though. It definitely does have a draw written all over it.
Yeah, I'll go draw. I think the two of them might cancel
this year.
Yeah, I think the two of them might cancel each other out. I'm going with a draw, but and I think that will see Cork safe and also Meath safe as well. Weird league for both counties, no question about it. Cork had some bad days, but also showed an incredible amount of fight, particularly in the last few minutes against Fermanagh. Like, they did not let the heads drop. They did not throw in the towel. They did not give up. They fought and scrapped for that last goal, and you cannot take that off them. And that's why they're in the position that they are, where they're safe. That's the fight you need to show to stay up in Division 2. Sorry. We move on then to the Alliance Football League Division 3. They're round 6. I'm going to run through the 4 games, ask you how you see this weekend's fixtures going. Obviously, the main one is Westmeath against Down at Cusack Park in Mullingar. We have Sligo taking on Offaly at Markovich Park. We have Wicklow taking on Limerick in Ockram. And we have Clare taking on Antrim at Cusack Park in Ennis.
Yeah, look, I think firstly, in terms of Down Westmeath, I think Down are, the highest scorers so far in Division 4 or in all 4 divisions. They've been very, very good. It kind of nearly reminds you of when Derry were in Division 3. I'm not saying now they're going to be on a similar trajectory around, but like Down do have a very young side in terms of a lot of under 20 players have come through. Conor Lafferty's obviously in charge of the under 20s himself. So there's a lot of positivity around Down. I'd be very curious to see what level they're at now going into Ulster and potentially Division 2 next season. But Westmeath, to be fair, 5 wins from 5. Again, maybe not as convincing in a lot of those wins, but yeah, I'd fancy Down. I'd fancy Down to come through it. In terms of Wicklow, Limerick, I don't know. I'd probably go Limerick. Maybe I think they're coming in with a little bit. They've played a little bit better than Wicklow. Wicklow beaten by 25 points the last day versus Offaly which is a little bit wild. I'd back Clare to come through Antrim. I think that should be a fairly handy one for Clare. And then in terms of Sligo Offaly, I'd actually probably fancy Offaly just after 25-point win versus Wicklow. I think Offaly are a good team. You know, they've had a very poor start to the league, but I think they are still a good side. You know, they were battling in Division 2 a couple of years ago, under 20 All-Ireland winners a couple of years ago. Nearly got to a Leinster final last year, took Louth to extra time and everything else. So yeah, I'd fancy Offaly to win that and make it back-to-back wins in Division 3.
Yeah, and then Clare Antrim.
Yeah, I'd probably go with Clare. I think Clare to come through Antrim at home. I think they should be too strong. I think I think Antrim could probably, there's a minute chance to get relegated, but you know, like they probably don't really have a lot to play for now at this stage.
Yeah, I think Antrim are where they're going to be. Clare are pushing for promotion, and what's interesting is that square ball call against Westmeath that could prove almightily costly for Clare if they miss out because of it. But I do think that they will beat Antrim. I do think that Limerick will beat Wicklow. They've shown me a little bit more than Wicklow have. Although I said this on Match's podcast, I could actually see it being a really frustrating draw for both sides where they both hold each other and it's like they go down together. Sligo, Offaly, I think you've convinced me. I did pick Sligo, but I will go Offaly. I think Offaly do have the talent to win that game, so I'm going to pivot last minute and go to Offaly. And Westmeath, Down, I'm going to go with Down. Down do give off that aura that Derry gave off. Not that they're going to, as I agree with you, not that they're going to hit the level that Derry have, but they give off that aura that like they're too good to be in Division 3. They've been absolutely like slapping teams up every weekend, like really putting beatings on teams, and they just seem way too good to be in this division. So I think they'll go up, and then I think they'll stay in Division 2 next year and really stamp themselves in that division and try kick on to make Division 1 football. We'll move then to the Alliance Football League's Division 4 round 6. The main game in this one is obviously Laois against Leitrim at O'Moore Park, on top of Longford against Carlow at Pearse Park. I'll put these two together because they both have real consequences for who goes up with Laois out of Division 4.
Yeah, and maybe a bit of a bold shout, but I actually fancy Leitrim to turn over Laois. And I know Laois have obviously won every game so far in Division 4, and I think they're the only team actually across all 4 divisions to have won every game. Well, actually, Down and Westmeath, to be fair, have won every game as well in Division 3, but obviously Laois have won every game so far in Division 4, and Leitrim have had a few disappointing results, but I just think Laois are already promoted. I know mathematically, it's not actually confirmed, but they're playing Waterford on the final day. I could see this game going down the home stretch. I could see Leitrim just having a bit more. Ryan O'Rourke's back on the side. Dara Rooney's been excellent so far. So I'd fancy Leitrim to do it. In terms of Longford Carlow, yeah, you'd probably edge towards Longford. They're coming in with a bit of form. Obviously beat Leitrim themselves. Seems like Paddy Christie has gotten a tune out of these Longford lads now, which is, obviously great to see. Is we're both Dubs and everything else, so we want to see, fellow Dublin men do well, in charge of teams and everything else. So good to see Paddy Christie getting a tune out of Longford, and I reckon they'll beat Carlow.
Yeah, I do agree with you on the Longford Carlow game. I like. Carlow really dropped the ball in the Wexford game. I wasn't expecting them to fall flat on their face the way that they did. They really didn't turn up against Wexford, and I feel like it's going to be hard to recover from that. I think Longford, meanwhile, fell on their face at the start, but now they've got up, and it's like they're catching up to Carlow, and I think they're going to overtake them in the promotion race. As for Laois, I think Laois beat Leitrim. I think Laois are Division 4 as that team. Like Luke was saying on our pod, like every division so far in the league has had that team. Like Derry have been that for Division 1, Donegal and Armagh have been that for Division 2, Westmeath and Down have been that for Division 3, and Laois have certainly been that for Division 4. They've won all their games, and they've won in every single way. They've hammered teams. They've won by a last-minute winner. So I'm going to go with Laois to turn over Leitrim, because this is the stage where Leitrim fell last year as well when it came to getting promoted. Then I'm going to go to the last 2 games. You have London against Waterford at Ruislip and Tipperary against Wexford in Moyne Temple Tuohy. I don't think any of these 4 teams are in the promotion race as such. Obviously, Wexford could make a last-minute push but I would be surprised if they did pull it off. The other teams, I think it's not to be for them this year. But what are you expecting from these 2 games?
Yeah, I'd probably go with Tipperary to beat Wexford, just because every time Wexford look like they've turned a corner, they then go out and lose the next week. So I think keep it in tradition with Wexford football over the last 10 years. I could fancy Tipperary to come through it, and then London Waterford, probably go with London maybe. Look, fair play to Waterford. I know a lot of us would love to see Waterford get a win, after the draw the last day, they nearly won that game. So they might maybe be coming in with a bit more belief and confidence. But I just fancy London. And the main reason is the fact they're at home. That's the main reason.
Yeah, I think if Waterford were at home, I might nudge towards them to win this game. But the fact it's in Ruislip is a difficult place to go, man. A lot of teams that, to be honest, I would fancy to beat Waterford have gone to Ruislip and found it extremely hard there against London. London make it very difficult for you, and I think that's going to be what Waterford find over there. So I am going with London. I am going to back you as well on the Wexford Tipperary thing. I honestly went for Wexford, but Wexford are probably the most underrated as the most inconsistent team in the country. Anytime Wexford get a result where you're like, whoa, okay, they've beaten one of the teams that are going for promotion, maybe Wexford can go for it, and then they lose the next game. They've done that so consistently over the last few years. So I am going to back you there. I'm going to say Tipperary beat Wexford, which then brings us off the football onto the hurling. And we're going to start with Division 1A's round 5. Waterford against Kilkenny at Walsh Park. And we were talking about Davy Fitz very much has his back against the wall, especially after the Wexford defeat. And now Kilkenny come to town. Kilkenny obviously losing their last game to Clare, but Kilkenny seem to be in a better place.
Absolutely, yeah. I think especially for Waterford, it was a fairly demoralising defeat to Wexford the last time out. All just doesn't seem right in Waterford. Especially when you look at last season. Davy Fitz obviously in charge, lost they're opening 4 games obviously in Munster, then obviously beat Tipperary in the final game, but it didn't mean anything necessarily for Waterford anyways, with the fact they were already gone. So yeah, look, 1 win so far from 4 games. I think their only win as well came against Offaly, wasn't it? So it just hasn't really looked good at all for Waterford. Big players obviously not making themselves available. You worry for Waterford, to be honest, because especially when you look at the standard that's there in Munster right now, you can see Waterford finishing bottom potentially again, and for that to happen, 3 years in a row? Because obviously I think they finished bottom under, or maybe they finished 4th that year under Liam Cahill. But either way, Waterford are in a right state at the moment, and Kilkenny obviously have a good bit to play for in terms of securing those league semi-final positions. So yeah, I'd fancy Kilkenny. And all honesty, I think their depth of their team, Owen Cody, Adrian Mullen, the fact that Leinster Championship now is getting closer and closer, you might start seeing more senior, even more senior players coming in. So yeah, I think Kilkenny will be too strong and probably run out 4 or 5, maybe even 6-point winners.
Yeah, I do agree. I think Waterford are giving off kind of a feeling of desperation, to be honest. That every defeat feels like a real dagger into the heart for Waterford. Losing the Wexford game, especially after the defeat the week previous to Clare, where Davy came out and said it's that 3rd effing quarter. That just felt like he was panicking a bit. And I did compare him to Mourinho at the time. I said, look, Davy and Mourinho are similar. I don't think Davy ever has a go at the players, by the way that Mourinho does. I just want to clarify that. I think Davy doesn't single out players the way Mourinho does. But my point is that those personality types, when it's going good, it's going great. When it's going bad, it's going absolutely terribly. And they kind of immediately, how could I word it? They magnify the feeling of the team. So if the team isn't going great, you can tell by Davy's demeanor, his mood, how he looks, how he talks. You can tell what it's like. And Waterford doesn't seem like a happy place to be, especially when you see so many top class players in Waterford being like, nah, not for me. So for me, I think Kilkenny win this game. I think Waterford don't have a great year. And then I could see maybe Ken McGrath coming in. When you see Ken McGrath being made the under-20 boss, and you see the backroom team that he got given just absolutely stacked to the gills with Waterford legends, that seems to me like they're waiting in the wings.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's they're sort of just keeping. It's almost like Davey sort of keeping the seat warm for Ken McGrath maybe to come in. Like I think Waterford they probably wanted to do this now for a while. I think especially with Liam Cahill not being a Waterford man and everything else, like when before Davey, like they do need a Waterford man to come in there and take charge. Man,
my stance on it, I think it's a load of waffle to bring in somebody from. If you're supposed to be a team that's going for an All-Ireland championship, I don't think a man from another county is going to bring it for you. I'm sorry, it hasn't worked.
Very rarely.
1998, we worked that out. Me and Matthew just went down a rabbit hole about it one time in a podcast. You figured out it was actually 1998 was the last time it yielded an All-Ireland hurling title. Michael Bond with Offaly. That was the last time it worked in the biggest stage of all. Kilkenny, Tip, Galway, Cork, all their All-Irelands, Clare as well with Davy Fitz. All the All-Irelands were won with men who were from that county. And I think it does just make the tiniest little difference, which is what it takes. That's the hair's breadth. But anyway, we'll move on then. I do think Kilkenny will win this game, by the way. I think we'll see, again, we like TJ's back.
Yeah.
Adrian Mullen's there. Owen Cody's there. They're moving nicely. For me, Kilkenny win this one. Offaly against Clare then in Bear. Offaly remind me a lot of Antrim in 2021 when Antrim came up in the league, and they started off by beating Clare and they drew a Wexford and they were making huge statements. Then they were really flying into tackles and showing that they weren't afraid to mix it with the big boys. And then in the last couple of rounds of that league campaign, they got absolutely battered because it's like they ran out of steam. Offaly started really well, getting the draw. Losing to Waterford but putting in a great performance, but then getting the draw against Wexford and having a great first half against Kilkenny. But last week they got absolutely battered by Cork and it looked like they kind of ran out of steam. This week against Clare, I could see something similar happening.
Yeah, no, you'd fancy Clare, I think, to be far too strong here. Like it is kind of unfortunate in some of these lesser counties, like in terms of Offaly, Westmeath, and nearly put Dublin in this bracket as well. Like they are very predictable games. Look, in fairness to Offaly, like they probably are a little bit different in the sense that they have had underage success recently. They've a young enough team. They had that good performance obviously against Wexford a couple of weeks ago. So like there is positivity with Offaly, even though obviously they are relegated and everything else. So yeah, like I think Clare obviously looking to get into those league semi-finals. I think they're a side that could really do a national trophy. So yeah, I think Clare will be way too strong here. Probably 6, 7, 8. Maybe with the fact that Clare, are probably already in those league semi-finals. Anyway, like yeah, I think Clare overall will still come through.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. Clare, take that one for me. This one's a really interesting one to look at. Wexford against Cork in Wexford Park. This is a really interesting one to call because Wexford had a great win against Waterford. They are undefeated in the league campaign. Drew with Kilkenny, drew with Offaly, and I think they drew the other game as well. Was that against Clare?
No. I think... Yeah, they drew Kilkenny. They drew a Kilkenny. Yeah, Clare, I think it was as well, actually.
Yeah, Clare, yeah, because I remember it was a lot of talk was about how they got absolutely annihilated by Clare last year. So yeah, Wexford, Cork, on the other hand, a tidy win against Offaly last week to, kick off then. Then obviously they beat Waterford too. Wexford, while they had a great win against Waterford, what I'm saying is Cork are in a better place than Waterford are. So this is going to be a bigger test. Do you think that Wexford can pass it, or do you think Cork will be too strong?
It's a hard one to know, to be honest. Like Wexford have, I think, a lot of positivity around Keith Rossiter so far. Some younger lads who've come in, Corey Byrne Dunbar as well. Both look very impressive. Lee Chin still to come back in the side as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of positivity around Wexford hurling as opposed to last year when, everything that happened obviously in the Leinster Championship. And, Wexford didn't become a bad team overnight. They always had good players there. They obviously have good structures in their hurling team because they've been able to continuously produce players over the last sort of 7, 8, 9 years. Yeah, this will be a tough test. Like Cork, I think have been like they've looked better in the last couple of games, but they were very flat to begin with. I think Cork probably suffer with a big problem of having almost too many players in the county. Like their squad is
they have a load of players. I was saying this to Match. They have a load of players that are similar.
Yeah, Yeah,
Like
like it's you
Shane
can
Barrett,
nearly feel two
same
Cork
thing.
teams together,
Yeah.
and they'd be identical. Maybe the only difference is Patrick Horgan.
But Ben Cunningham on the other team is kind of the
Yeah,
protege to Horgan. I think it's really interesting. And like the one thing that I've wanted to see out of Cork is back a forward line.
yeah,
Back a forward line. Because you look at Limerick, you know every game. It's Hegarty. If they have everybody, it's Hegarty, Lynch, Morrissey, Casey, Gillan, Flanagan in the full forward line.
yeah.
In whatever order. You know that's their six forwards they're going with. Cork, I haven't a breeze who's in their six forwards. One year it's Conor Lehan, the next year it's Alan Connolly, the next year it's Jack O'Connor, the next year it's Declan Dalton, and they kind of change who goes alongside Patrick Horgan and Séamus Hannity. But number 12, number 15, and number 13 have constantly been in limbo over the last few years. Robbie O'Flynn seems to have number 10 locked down. But the others, I'm like, please pick one, because if you pick one, then you can learn how to play together better. Your chemistry can improve, and that makes a big, big difference. The Limerick lads and the forwards, they know how to play together. They know how to play together, and that makes a massive difference in the big games. So I'd be looking at Cork thinking, please do that. And I think if they do, I think their pace could be huge, and that's why I am picking Cork to win this. I think Cork's pace in the forward line might be too much. Shane Kingston, Jack O'Connor, and now the fact that they have Alan Connolly in the team, who is a goal getter, he got a hat trick against Offaly. He very much goes for goal, and that could add the X factor to this Cork team in a game like this. Wexford still without Lee Chin, still without Diarmuid O'Keefe, still without Conor MacDonald. I know Keane Byrne and Corey Byrne Dunbar, like they've been really welcome additions to the team. I think Cork will have too much. I'm going with Cork in this one.
Yeah, I'd probably fancy Cork as well. I think to come through. Like I think maybe Wexford have maybe had a slight bit of fortune at times in getting a few of those draws. And yeah, I think Cork with their firepower should have enough to come through. But look, in fairness to Wexford, they've defied the odds a couple of times already this year. So you wouldn't be surprised if they got something for this, especially at home. But yeah, I'd go for Cork as well.
Yeah, no, I do agree with you. Now, the Allianz Hurling League Division 1B Round 5. This one is really the obvious game to look at out of this division's Galway against Limerick. It's in Pearse Stadium. It's a double header with Galway against Dublin. Fantastic. It's about time we started doing more double headers. Galway against Limerick in Pearse Stadium. Obviously, a replay of last year's All-Ireland Hurling semi-final. Limerick on the rampage. Can you see them being stopped?
I don't know, to be honest. You feel like they have to lose a game. They have to give someone a chance at some stage. Because once they click into Munster and the All Ireland, they're probably not going to lose many games there. And the mad thing is, like, fair enough, they have, the last game, obviously they brought Aaron Gillan back in. Keane Lynch came back in. They've been slowly introducing players here and there. Obviously, Kyle Hayes came back in for the Dublin game and then was obviously out for the last game as well. So you don't really know what's happening with Limerick at the best times. They're slowly introducing players in, but even the likes of Donegal O'Dowling have looked very good. Cathal O'Neill's almost like a senior player now at this stage, and he's a very good option for Limerick to have. So it's hard to really know. Like Galway, have looked okay, but to be honest, I actually fancy Limerick to do it again. Especially with those younger, with the fringe players. Like it's almost like kind of reminds me when Dublin, during Dublin's 6 in a row spell, there was a long period of time where Dublin were winning a couple of league titles in a row, and the main reason being was the fringe players were stepping up because of the fact they wanted to get into the main team. And I can see something similar happening with Limerick. And Limerick just have the caveat of, well, let's bring Aaron Gillan off the bench, let's bring Tom Morrissey off the bench, let's bring Gerard Hegarty off the bench. And yeah, I could see Limerick beating them.
Yeah, no, I think Limerick win this game as well, especially when you consider the fact that Daithí Burke and Conor Whelan are both suspended. That's their best defender and their best forward gone. I don't know how you recover from that. I think Limerick are just on the rampage. I completely agree with you. Adam English, Donegal O'Dowling and Shane O'Brien for me have been really, really good so far. Colin Coughlin's got minutes into him as well. It's all ticking along very, very nicely, which is great for Limerick and not great news for everybody else that's trying to stop them from completing history this year. The two other games look like games that should be fairly easy to call, but can you see any trip-ups in either of them? I'll pair them together. Antrim host Tipperary in Corrigan Park. Dublin host Westmeath in Parnell Park. Now, you would make Tipperary and Dublin favourites for those games, but can you see an upset happening?
I wouldn't Antrim Tipperary. I think Tipperary will be way too strong there. Unfortunately, Antrim have lost players and probably regressed. Westmeath might have a chance against Dublin, because Dublin there doesn't seem to be much kind of happening with Dublin hurling at the minute. Like Westmeath maybe having probably they've lost a few players as well. They probably just aren't at that level. But look, Westmeath will probably be looking at it and thinking it's an opportunity to beat Dublin, because Dublin seem to be struggling to field a consistent starting 15. Like I don't think Micheál Donoghue knows his best starting 15 in all honesty. And yeah, it just doesn't like Dublin just seem very easy to play against at the minute. And look, maybe with this game being against Westmeath, with Dublin expected to win, and this is a game you'd expect them to turn up in, they probably will perform and get the job done and get the win. Like I will back Dublin to win the game, but I wouldn't be entirely surprised if Westmeath got a draw or something like that, because Westmeath again, because they had these against Wexford in the last couple of years. It's almost like the type of games where they feel like they have a slight chance. Every now and again they just put in a performance. So I could see Westmeath maybe pushing it to Dublin, but I do think Dublin will still come through.
Yeah, I definitely would back Tipperary to beat Antrim. I think Tipperary will put their foot down and be a bit ruthless in that game. I think Tip will probably win that by about 9 or 10. Because Antrim have been hit so hard, like Neil McManus, Keelan Malloy, like you cannot afford to lose those players. They've been the beating heart of their success under Darren Gleeson, and I really hope that they save it and they turn the ship around and head back on their progress again, because I really, really enjoyed watching their progress under Gleeson. With the Dublin and Westmeath game, it's definitely more there for an upset to happen, because Westmeath, put it up to Limerick, they put it up to Tipperary, and like they beat Wexford in last year's Leinster Championship. It's not out of the realm of possibility that they could beat Dublin. Like there's a world where Westmeath beat Dublin, but I don't think it's the world that we're going to live in this weekend. I think Dublin will win this game and bounce back after the tough last day out. Now we'll move on to the other games. So I will run through the fixtures that are taking place in 2A, 2B, 3A, and 3B, and then we'll move on to the LFA Division 1. So in 2A, the fixtures that are taking place is Kildare against Carlow in Hawkfield. That's a massive game. Laois and Kerry in O'Moore Park. Down and Meath in McKenna Park. Laois and Carlow are facing each other in the Division 2A final. That will be an interesting one to look at. Division 2B's round 5 as well. We have Derry against Roscommon and Owen Begg, Donegal against London in Letterkenny, and Tyrone against Wicklow in Dungannon. In 3A, we have Sligo against Mayo in Kent Park, Cavan against Monaghan in Kingspan, Breffni Park, and Armagh against Louth at the Athletic Grounds. And in 3B, we have Fermanagh against Longford at Brewster Park, and Warwickshire against Lancashire in Park Naheran. So another bumper weekend of action in the hurling. Most of it taking place on the Saturday. As I said, keep an eye out for a little Saturday episode recap. Might be needed in extraordinary circumstances. We'll move on then from the Sliotar back to the Gaelic football. The LGFA National League's Division 1 Round 6. We're going to start off with the team that have been absolutely flying it. Armagh sit top of the table with a 100% win record. They now go away to face Mayo in Ballina Stephenites. Do you think they can keep the 100% record going?
I think they can. Especially after such a convincing win against Kerry, who obviously won the league last year. I think we've been waiting for this with Armagh for a while now. I remember when Meath obviously won the All-Ireland a couple of years ago, people were talking about Armagh before Meath as maybe being that type of team, that could go on a run and not necessarily win an All-Ireland, but at least, compete for it and compete for major honours. And they've been absolutely flying form. The name that obviously springs to mind is Amy Mackin, and I saw she was on the BBC Social, I think it was as well, podcast. So I'll definitely have to
Thomas Niblock.
Yeah, I seen she was on. I haven't listened to it yet, but I'll definitely have to give that a listen probably in the next few days. But yeah, look, Aoife McCoy's been very, very impressive as well. I think Armagh will probably be too strong here.
Yeah, no, I think Mayo is an interesting one because Mayo have the capability to put in a fantastic performances. They were awesome against Dublin in the first half. They were comfortably ahead, and Dublin absolutely monstered them in the second half and completely stole that victory from the jaws of defeat. Mayo have the capability to make life difficult for Armagh, but when you look at how Armagh dealt with Kerry, and when you look at how they've gone away on these tricky away days to Waterford, to Cork, to Galway, and they've left with the win all the time, I'd be confident in Armagh that they can keep it going. And it's the way that they beat Meath as well. They really beat Meath comfortably. And it's something that made me sit up and take notice and think, maybe they've got it right this time, because we know that they've always had the scintillating forwards. Amy Mackin is as good as it gets. Aoife McCoy, Kelly Mallon, Clodagh McCambridge, Caroline O'Hanlon, like they've got some cracking footballers in there. And if they are getting it right, then the rest of the country better sit up and take notice. Dublin have seemed to have been getting it right as well after the back-to-back defeats to kick off their league campaign. Cork started with a win, but it's gone very quickly downhill from that point on. They lock horns at DCU. Cork are now in a relegation battle. Dublin looking up the other way. I can't see anything but a Dublin victory, especially when you consider that Katie Quirk is still injured for Cork, and Darren O'Sullivan, Ciara O'Sullivan, and Roisin Phelan have all retired, so they won't be in this game either. I can only see a Dublin win.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think Cork have had a fair few heavy defeats, obviously, in the last couple of games. Maybe a slight end of era for Cork in more ways than one. And I think Dublin, like Hannah Tyrrell, obviously 5 points the last day, very impressive. Kate Sullivan as well, with a couple of points. So against Waterford. So yeah, look, I'd fancy Dublin, I think, to come through it against Cork. You know, like Dublin have the knack of obviously winning these games. Cork have been on the slide, like they were beaten. I remember seeing they were beaten quite heavily by Kerry a couple of weeks ago as well. So yeah, look, I'd fancy.
Waterford one was the worst one for me, man. Waterford one was the worst.
That was
Waterford beat them out the gate.
Yeah, like it's not really a good look for Cork football. Like, unfortunately, since obviously Cork's dominant spell in ladies football, it's sort of there has been a gradual decline as the years have sort of gone on. And I know they do have impressive players, no doubt about it, and they'll probably be in the mix later in the year, maybe for the All Ireland and everything else. They weren't a million miles off last year, but I just think with the way Dublin are, a couple of wins obviously on the spin, yeah, I'd fancy Dublin to beat Cork.
Yeah, no, I am agreeing with you. I think Dublin will take it, especially when you consider their form has turned. Cork without Katie Quirk, who is their absolute pivotal player, her being gone is a massive, massive blow. Daniel Costello says here, Cork have a bad points difference too. Mad how a few years changed. Yeah, like genuinely is. Cork are in a very difficult position, and we're going to go on to this game because this game is massive, especially when you consider the relegation battle. Galway and Waterford meet at Pearse Stadium. Waterford obviously beat Cork. That got them off the mark. Galway then responded to that by picking up their first victory by beating Meath. So this game really has the makings of a 4-pointer here. Who do you see taking this one? It's in Pearse Stadium.
Yeah, I fancy Waterford. I fancy Waterford, to be honest with you. Like, I know Shauna Hayes has been in good form for Galway recently, but I just fancy Waterford. Like, Waterford have had some, like, even against Dublin the last day, it was only a narrow enough defeat. As you mentioned before, like big wins against the likes of Cork. Waterford over the last couple of years have been able to dig out big results when they've needed to. Or they kind of do remind me of the Monaghan a little bit in in men's football. So yeah, I'd fancy Monaghan to do it. Which might be maybe a bit of or I fancy Waterford to do it. Sorry, it's been look, it's been a long day. I fancy Waterford to do it.
Yeah, no. I actually am going to go with Galway. I think Waterford are scrappers, like no question about it. Waterford are certainly scrappers. Like, you see how difficult they made things for Kerry when they went down there. It's just, I watched Galway play against Dublin in Parnell Park, and I still don't know how they didn't win that game. Like, they were the better team for all of the game, and Dublin just pulled them back in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and snatch the win, like very much smash and grab. And like, I genuinely at the end of the game, like, was like, how on earth have Galway thrown that away? And I feel like Galway players look like that as well. They just couldn't believe that they'd lost that game. Dublin players couldn't believe that they'd won. But I will go with Galway's. With home comforts, I'll go with them to take this one. Which brings us on to the final game. It's a replay of the 2022 All-Ireland final. Meath take on Kerry and Ashburn. Meath, it's an interesting one. They started off like a house on fire. Back-to-back wins over Mayo and Dublin. And you were thinking, like, hold up, Meath could be back. Since then, they've had some bad results. And Kerry, on the other hand, had a bad result last week against Armagh. Other than that, been fairly ordinary league campaign out of them. They still have the likes of Louise Verhertig. Meath, on the other hand, have Emma Duggan. This could be the makings of an absolute cracking contest. It's in Ashburn. Meath have home advantage. Who are you thinking for this one?
Tough one, really. Like, as you said before, like, obviously Meath under new management, bit of a kick, obviously, after everything that kind of happened there last year at the start of the year, and it probably has fallen off a cliff ever so slightly. I'd fancy Kerry, I think, to get back to winning ways. Obviously, it was a big setback versus Armagh last day, probably a result that caught a lot of people by surprise. But Kerry are the league champions. They do have big players, and I'd still fancy them to come through this, I think.
Yeah, I probably will agree with you. I think Kerry, made it look quite easy actually going away to Dublin and winning in the way that they did in Parnell Park. Whereas on the flip side, Meath have stuttered a bit now. And I do think that it will be enough. I wouldn't be surprised now if Meath won, but if you gun to my head, pick one, I'll go with Kerry to take this one. And we'll run through the other games that are taking place in the LGFA leagues. The Division 2's round 6. In this, we have Tipperary take on Monaghan at Fethard Town Park. Laois take on Westmeath at the Laois Centre of Excellence. Tyrone face Kildare in Berra. And they're the two teams that have been smashing it. I fancy Kildare to take that. I fancy Kildare to win the whole division. They have been on fire. Cavan against Donegal then in the Max McGrath Memorial Park. I probably fancy Donegal to take that and keep up their push for promotion as well. And then moving on to the LGFA Division 3's round 6. Wexford take on Sligo in Enniscorthy. Clare take on Antrim in St. Joseph's Dura. Down take on Louth in Burren. And Roscommon take on Offaly in Ballyfour. And Clare continue to be the standout team in that division as well. Obviously, recently the side that lost and right at the death in the All-Ireland intermediate final against Kildare. So they could be playing senior football, very, very easy, could be playing senior football next in this upcoming championship as well. So I fancy them to get out of Division 3. So that has been the roundup of the preview of what is to come this weekend. It's going to be a bumper weekend. Big thank you to you, Aaron, for jumping on the show. Big thank you to anybody who tuned in over the weekend. We have a big weekend coming, guys. Enjoy the GA. Enjoy St. Patrick's Day as well. Enjoy whatever festivities that you end up at. Go Mila Mahagwiv. I've been Séamus Brady. Until the next episode, guys, here on Cluiche. Torah.